One of the things that I've been speaking to a lot of manufacturers at recently is there is potential that margins are going to get slashed across the board now. So there's like this perceived ceiling of value in everything we do, right? Everything in the world, there's a perceived ceiling. And because demand for things are going up, I've been talking to a lot of LED manufacturers at the moment in China. And for years, people used to there was like 3 or 4 LED manufacturers in China. And then everybody OEM'd. They used to take the panel, rebadge it, and sell it as that. That's all changing.
Right.
Because the demand is so big now for LED that the profit margins are starting to decrease. So companies can't rebadge anymore.
Right.
So a lot of these big video wall companies now, they're all going out of the market.
Right.
There's only going to be 3 or 4 in the next 5 years.
Wow.
And they're all the rest are going completely. They just decided they can't do it. They can't make the money. They can't sustain it. But what that's going to mean is that profit margins across the board are getting restricted. And the way the market's going is that there's a high probability that margins are going down.
I've always felt of us, what we do, we've always been more kind of specialised. We've sort of, I don't know, stay in our lane, if you like. You know, we know what we're doing with cinema, media room, extended multi-room and stuff like that. And I think I mentioned before about the broad knowledge a dealer has to have now with networking and so many things. And Mark, you mentioned some of the big companies literally have specialised teams that do that, and it's incredible. I see that, and I generally see integrators sometimes actually going with the very best thing they can for that. You know, it's truly custom install for that client. Others perhaps, you know, through various reasons will do repeatable systems. So what value can we offer?
Well, I mean, I think like you were just saying, I think, you know, a lot of people have a templated way to working, and there's nothing wrong with templated designs when they're for templated buildings, but I've never worked in one of those. I think at the end of the day, I think we've got to get back to being at that core of what we do is very specialist and everything is individual. You know, and yes, we do IT and you do access control and you do all these various elements, but that doesn't mean we should be going to a distributor to look at the whole plethora of those items. Like that's just, I see it as a very convenient way to operate as a business. But with what you do, Jamie, you know, you've been always based around doing, you know, high performance audio, media rooms. That's what you've done. And, you know, whenever I was an integrator and I used to think about a project, you know, you were always in the back of my mind for the cinema room. And I think that's always a good thing, you know, to mix the business you do with different distributors. You know, it's kind of going back, I think I said this to you a few years ago, that John Caldwell, the guy that has Phones for You, you know, one of his rules in his sort of business empire is the 10% rule. And his 10% rule is never have 10% of your sales with more than one customer. Never allow more than 10% of your business to be run by one person, and never buy more than 10% of products from one supplier.
Okay. Does that mean you always need more than 10 people in your company, though, doesn't it?
Potentially. But I think that's always been a good way to operate as a business because you're spreading the risk, you know, and, you know, I think, look, let's face it, in our industry in construction, there's huge amounts of risks. It's a race to the bottom. You know, so I've always kind of appreciated that when we were an integrator. You know, I thought that was always a good way to operate is, you know, have different suppliers, different clients. You know, don't put your eggs in one basket. So kind of coming back to where you are, I think the way you've always stood up as a distributor has been great because you're specialist. You know, you're not, you know, muddying the water with other products that you're just trying to create an Argos catalogue of different AV products. You know, you are specialists, you know, and I appreciate that personal touch. You know, it's amazing when you kind of deal with somebody, a distributor, and you've known them a long time and they're selling their products and, oh, this is the best. 3 years later, they move to another distributor and so you get the same sales pitch, you know. I've always appreciated doing business with you, Joe, because of that, you know.
Thank you.
And I think that's rare in our industry now. I think you know, we're getting that ease, you know, where we're just going to the big Argos of distributors to get everything. But is that really the best approach for clients?
I think it's a bit like... you know, you can go to Gusto, can't you, and get your box of ingredients, and it's got a nice recipe card. Basically, there you go. Here's your meal plan for the week. You're sorted. That is what it's like if you go to just one distributor, effectively, to get your kit. As an integrator, I'd have thought you want to be more like a chef, a good chef who's out there sourcing the best ingredients from various suppliers, and then creating, you might be following a recipe, but not wholly defined recipe, but you're then really forming this end product, this dish, which you want to serve up. That's going to be the best of the best. It's going to taste really good, smell really good, and it's going to excite your client, your customer.
I think that's one of the things in our industry now is if I had a project come along and I went to 4 integrators and said, I've got a cinema room, design it, just said, look, you guys propose what you want to do. I reckon 3 of the 4 I'd have the same design, or the same manufacturers, the same kind of products. I can guess that from day one, which is amazing when we're in an industry with thousands of AV products. And, it's a funny thing, like if you go back to talking about earlier about 2-channel stereo, kind of those audiophile nutcases we all know, you go back to that industry and, just buying a really expensive amplifier and a really expensive pair of speakers does not mean they work well together. It's really interesting how different amplifiers work with different speakers. We've kind of lost touch with that passion. I don't know about everybody else, but I got into this industry when I was 16 years old because I was passionate about audio. And I think that when you talk to kind of some of the heads of these businesses that have been around 30 odd years, a lot of them are the same way. They started with passion. Does anybody get excited about templates design, like the way that's approached? I used to love kind of find different audio products. Sometimes when we used to go to ISC and used to find these tweaky little, these little stalls in the corners where these have these different products. It was amazing to see what you could find. We really have stepped into an era where it's just templates.
I would say we demo our facilities, with integrators, and then clients come through sometimes with the integrators. I get most excited when the end clients come in with the integrator and they just sort of, let me do the demo. I'm not going to push anything particular, but it needs it, whatever. If the dealer says that that projector's sorted, Jamie, want to hear your audio, fine, I'll do it that way. But my point being, when the end client comes in and they experience something like we do for the first time, I get excited by that because I see their face and I think, wow, they haven't experienced anything like this before, and I think there's certainly merit in that. And I think there's kind of a passion talking about a minute ago. We've kind of lost that a little bit, I think. So, I get most excited because we see a lot of good kit and there's a lot of good stuff out there. So not that we've come blasé about it, but there's a lot of choice and a lot of good kit. But I still get excited by seeing an end client come through and they go, oh my God, that's a star ceiling. Or, wow, that's incredible. Right? The bass, all those sorts of things that we may so take for granted. But
I think our clients they're being shown a chain restaurant. They're being shown Pizza Express. And you can go to Pizza Express, you get the same food, whether you're in Maidenhead, wherever in the country. Whereas as a consultant, I think, yes, we have the luxury, I suppose, of being able to pick and show our clients whatever we choose based on what they've spoken to us about in our interaction. But, I can take them to your showroom and say, yeah, here's one option. I can take them to another distributor.
Of course, yeah.
Here's another option.
Yeah.
And they will buy into the sound, the people, as in yourself, and your passion behind it, and your knowledge of the product. Like Sam was saying, you've got a range of products that you've dealt with for years and years and years. You're clearly invested and passionate about that, and there's so much value in that compared to flip-flopping between brands. And okay, that brand's available. Let's bring that one on. Yeah, okay, we're seeing a bit of traction in the market. Let's bring that one on. Whereas I know it's like, okay, Jamie's solid to this, and this, and I know what you're delivering.
I also have to admit that some of our brands aren't right for every purpose.
No.
And I'll be the first to say that.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't have that in our portfolio.
But it's back to every project being unique.
Yes.
Every client being unique.
Yeah.
Not every. Yeah. I think you're right in terms of people aren't viewing the quality anymore either. So it's coming down to, you'll see on a spec, we'll spec, say, a multi-channel amplifier for a distributed audio system, and it'll be 100 watts per channel, and it'll be Class D and yada, yada, yada. And someone else will come along and it'll be like, well, but this is 100 watts per channel. Yeah, but is it actually really 100 watts per channel, all channels driven? Now, does the client actually understand what that means? No. we understand what that means. And I know from personal experience the difference in the quality between a certain 100-watt per channel amplifier and another one. And I know I've specified that one because I know it's the right solution for the performance level of that client's requirements, the size of the rooms and so forth. Not just said, right, okay, here's one amplifier because I'm buying all my other kit from that same place, and it's just easy, isn't it?
Convenience, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's one of the things I'm finding. I think that a lot of the time people are buying products based on convenience. And, some of these big manufacturers we have, some of these big manufacturers we have, big distributors we have, they're doing such a range of products that I think it's very simple. And I do understand it from an integrator perspective, because we are very busy. It's a hard industry. Products change every few months. So I do understand the convenience. And, we're not here to disrupt that. And there are some projects which are always going to be fit for those products. But I think what we're trying to do is just trying to align clients with the right products now, rather than it being out of convenience. And I think, we're trying to bring some passion back into the industry, and also ensure that good people are doing good projects.
Yeah.
And, we need to build a bit of faith back into our industry from clients. I mean, I'm not sure about you, but the amount of times that I used to have a client come through the door and be like, I'm not having a smart home anymore. Last project never worked.
Right.
I think we've all seen these, right? That's rife in our industry because our industry doesn't have consultants that are monitoring and making sure good people are doing good jobs. So wouldn't it be great to bring some kind of faith back into our industry, where you get a client that comes through the door and says, I can't wait to have a smart home again. Last project was fabulous. I love the cinema room. I want to do something bigger. It's been a long time since I've had a client like that.
Okay.
And I think for me, that comes round to specification again, which is obviously what we do as consultants. But it is saying, because I don't think certainly when I was an integrator, it sometimes got documented, didn't often get documented. What does a client actually expect?
Yeah.
So how do we solve this moving forward then? That's kind of, bring it to that. So from a distributor and manufacturer point of view, no one knows the products as well as the manufacturers. And then obviously the distributors have a good knowledge of that as well. So we can hopefully impart some knowledge in terms of product. We don't claim to have the on-site experience of integrators. We can't do. We're not there at the fighting edge and really seeing what happens. So I'm always respectful and conscious of what actually the integrator is facing day to day. The client screaming down the phone that something isn't working. I get that secondhand, and we try and help, of course. So I totally respect the integrator
industry.
Yeah, totally. But how can we help as an industry? And I mean, there's smaller distributors like ours, there's larger ones, and we all have our place and we do different things, and most of us do it well, with good intentions. What can we do to help the integrators? You mentioned training. We're going to hold a Home Acoustics Alliance training later this year again. I'm a big advocate of that because I think just knowing what you're doing with the acoustics of the room is pretty important when you're doing it.
And it was actually something that we did years ago as an integrator. We had one of our guys went on that training, and it was really beneficial.
Yeah, so we're going to do that again later this year. We're going to get a date sorted for that. But so I think that's the sort of thing we should be doing to try and educate the market and impart that knowledge. So anything else do you think we should specifically be doing?
I think it's about making an integrator's life as easy as possible. So, right. The easy solution with an AVR is to get the microphone that comes with it, plug it in,
press auto EQ.
But is that right? Is that actually tuning a room? Is that
how many times you found a mistake with?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't tune our rooms like that, I can tell you.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Projectors, are they just being out of the box switched on, or are we actually changing the color gamut on it to the right? Are we actually approaching that in the right way? Even down to the TVs, going, the standard 65-inch TV that's on the wall, is it still just in its shop mode and it's like over bright, or actually are the integrators taking the time to fine tune it, make it as best an experience for the clients as possible? I think so making an integrator's life easy, so a nice checklist to say, right, with this bit of kit, this audio controlled AVR, this is what you can follow as a simple checklist to get you started on that road, to make it, rather than having to think, okay, I've got this AVR this time, what am I doing with this? Just a really nice little checklist. This JVC projector, how do I make this better? Obviously, you can go the whole hog and have it calibrated, but how do I just get this better as soon as I've got it out of the box, as soon as it's shining a light on the wall?
That's things I think we do to some degree, but we could certainly be better. I think we can all learn and be better all the time. That's, whether we're distribution, manufacturing, integrate.
I still do draining to this day.
Exactly. So, but I'm just conscious that we do need to evolve and change and give the best experience for ultimately the end client. So, wherever we can do as an industry, I'm up for supporting what we can do from CABD side. So it does sound like training and imparting knowledge is certainly one of those things. Maybe we'll start wrap it up on a final point. Designing a system. Now, I see a whole range of integrators I work with over the years, and we mentioned some very large ones that do very large scale projects to single guys land a whale of a client sometimes. It happens, doesn't it? It happens. And then there's everything in between.
And to be fair, you see a quality contrast between all those companies. I've met some single person companies that have produced some amazing.
I agree. It doesn't necessarily mean the bigger company doing the better job.
No, there's passion at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. Where was I going to go with that one? So, design. Thank you. We'll cut my blurb there. Design. So the products we sell, we know really well. So I tend to get people say to me, no matter whatever level they're at, look, Jamie, have I got this right? Or, can you run this by Theory Audio? Just say, is this right? I don't see any harm in that whatsoever. I think do you see that being okay?
I think there's a huge amount of reliance on more than that. I think from some distributors, we see a lot more. I've seen, I've heard of companies where they issue a room layout to a distributor and say, design me a cinema. I don't think a lot of integrators understand where their insurances are sometimes, and realizing that, if a distributor gave you a full design for a cinema and said, look, this is where you put speakers, these are the speakers you should put in, regardless of that they've had a proposal from a distributor or a manufacturer, the insurance and the professional indemnity stops with the integrator. So if they get to the end of their project, it's not right and it doesn't work, if the client's not happy, it doesn't matter what the distributor sent out, it's our integrator. I think there's no harm in sending designs to a manufacturer just to, sanity check.
Yes.
Sanity check.
Yeah.
But over and above, you should have, confidence in what you're delivering. So that when you do a design, you should feel confident in it. I think they should have that amount of confidence. I think it's always good to share with you because, let's face it, as a distributor, you might turn around and say, when's that project going to be delivered? That product's on this amount of lead time, X, Y, and Z. But yes, I always feel that design should be down to the integrator.
Okay.
No, design is down to the consultant.
If you're lucky enough to have us. No, but I think, it is. I think it's important that, design is taken on by, and that's why things like your HAA course.
Yeah.
I think that's really beneficial for integrators to learn aspects of AV, because like I say, you go 20 years ago and a lot of the integrators, that's where they stemmed from, was core AV. Whereas now
AV is, AV is, 20% of probably a spend quite often on a home now. It's a small fraction. We've diversified way away from AV, which is a shame in some ways because there's some brilliant stuff out there.
Yeah, I know, it's funny. I think I agree in some respect. I actually think that a lot of the, maybe not the video, but the audio side of the industry is coming back. I think that, for many years we were all about the AV. The amount of times I used to, install large, floor standing speakers, and we used to do cinema rooms. That was our thing, 20 years ago. We then changed into integration. We started to integrate all these different services. We'd integrate the HVAC, all these, the gates, the access control. We'd even get down to integrating their pool cover, on the system because they really wanted to do all of it. I feel like that's tapering off again because either people have had a bad experience or because it's become very simple to do. We now integrate very easily. And I find the budgets are switching back to audio. You know, I've had a lot more clients that have been interested in cinema rooms. I think that was a huge boost out of COVID.
Okay, yeah.
You know, people were stuck indoors and they suddenly were in these 3-bedroom apartments in Mayfair and suddenly realised that, you know, you couldn't go outside and you didn't have much to do. I think clients are moving out of London a lot. We see that a lot now. You know, some of the big companies and interior designers, developers are moving into the Cotswolds. Yeah, we see a lot of business there now. And people are starting to spend money on having high-end audio cinema rooms. I think it's been a huge thing since COVID. But I do think that, you know, if integrators have been very used to the smart home tech and not so much into the audio side, I think that's where they should probably focus a good amount of energy.
That's interesting.
Maybe looking at turnkey cinema rooms. You know, I see that a lot now from integrators where, you know, they're not just coming in to install some speakers and projection. They take on that whole area. So they'll do the acoustic paneling, they do the seats, they do everything. They literally get given a shell and core room and they deliver the whole package. I think that's a great business. And let's face it, when you see a client at the end of a project, when you show them that you can control the pool cover from their touch panel, there's not a lot of happiness there. But when you turn on that audio system in a cinema room and you get that wow factor, it's pretty amazing. I even spoke to an integrator recently where they had a client come in to their showroom and that client actually shed a tear when they were watching a certain scene. That's the kind of a sort of response that I want to see.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Going back to what you said, when you have private clients come in,
Right.
that's where you get excited. And I think that's a good place for integrators to focus energy, like get back into the cinema rooms, you know, that high-end audio. I think it's a good area where you're going to get that satisfaction at the end.
I agree. Totally agree. It's yeah. Well, that'd be a great place to finish, guys. So, yeah. So in short, really, we talked about sort of changing, evolving markets and reacting to those changes. And effectively, I think we're saying more that the residential is following the commercial suit and probably becoming more professional, for want of a better word, more accountability, more structure. And I think we need to adjust slightly to adapt to that and become much more service-led through eroding the margins. And as a distributor, manufacturer, we can support that by imparting more knowledge, help, support, to a degree, and go from there. So,
yeah, I agree. I think, you know, if I had any recommendation to integrators out there, my advice would be to, you know, look at your expertise and what you're offering into the market. You know, see if you can, you know, offer a more premium service, do something different, dare to be different.
Yeah.
You know, and I would focus more on how you can start offering a service where you can charge and make money out of that service rather than it being all focused on profit margins of the product. Because if we're looking at a future where product margins are going to decline over the next 5 to 10 years, you want to build a business based on the service you're providing.
Yeah.
And that's what shines brightly.
Avoid the rush to the bottom.
Correct. And that's why in the commercial world, these integrators, you know, they've been there a long time because it's their service that they focus on.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Jamie.
Chat to you.
Good.
We'll leave it there.
Yeah.